not even half, cause all you need is,
But then
you're growing that from 800 students to 1,000 students in phase one. In phase two, you would need another addition again, because you're just gonna continue to grow in that 4 or 5 grade level.
and we have 3 sites currently that you would say are the older, original elementary schools.
Right,
The Salem site gets a new building there
Yep.
under this plan.
Yep.
And so that building goes away.
Yep.
But you at least are replacing it with a new building on that site.
Yep.
And I'm guessing that site is gonna house kids from Salem, Morrow,
Mhm.
Butlerville, right?
yes,
Okay? The Butlerville site would be, the current Butlerville site would not have students on it anymore, and we could do with it as we choose.
correct.
The current Mainville site could be a central office space, or are we talking about taking Salem, Morrow, and Butlerville, all 3 offline? Is that in this scenario?
Yes,
And doing nothing with any of those 3 sites?
unless the decision was to renovate Mainville and put board offices in there.
And is that,
But it's not a school anymore, yes, it would not serve as a school function.
Christie, could the transportation renovation
that was my next question.
department stay on its current location with the new primary current? or-
If you want to make improvements to the transportation and build new buildings for the transportation, my suggestion would be, it would be nice if that was on a different site, so that that elementary could grow in the future if it wanted to grow.
Okay, so if
We could do a whole new transportation facility on that site, but you're gonna be limited as to the future of the elementary because of the transportation taking up a sizable chunk of the
So
site.
could transportation and central office move to the Mainville site? Is that site big enough to house both of those? If you're not gonna
That
have any
site-
students there?
That, you would need to replace the building, I think, in order to get that site, because that site is just the size that we need for a transportation facility. My guess is that that building is not in the location that we would need it to be able to store all the buses and get the egress, ingress that we would need. The site itself is the appropriate size, I just think that you would probably need to replace the building with a building in an appropriate
A
location,
smaller central office space and then a transportation space on that site.
possibly. I would need to look and see if we could fit all of that.
And the Morrow site as it sits is not suitable for a central office or
Mm-mm.
it's not big enough for a transportation
No,
facility
no,
there on
cause
that
that's,
site.
yeah, no, that's a third of the size of what you need for a transportation facility.
But it's big enough to house central office,
The site,
yes.
the site is big enough to house central office, yeah.
Well, the building's big enough, right?
The building is
need-
big enough if you want to, if you wanted to put those dollars into renovating it,
But I'm
yes.
just asking the question.
Yes, the building is
big
certainly
enough.
big enough, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that was option 2C. Do you want me to go back then to the option ones that we, okay?
What was,
1A, 1B?
So 1A, 1B were the other ones we were looking at. These keep the high school, so option 1A keeps the high school a high school in phase 1. And then it replaces it in phase 2. If we know that we are going to replace the high school in phase 2, I would not do that full 90,000 square foot addition to the high school that I'm saying you need for an 1,800 student high school, because I think it would be wasteful, because come phase 2, it's too much building. So I would do the bare minimum addition that I think maybe you could get by with in phase 1, which would be a 40,000 square foot addition. I think you're still gonna be tight, in that building, but I think we might be able to get it to work. You're gonna be missing some of the,
Can we flip these side of the lights on this side? You have to go into the small spreadsheet.
oh, I have them there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, bless you.
Here,
oh, no, now with the light, we can see.
Yeah, I can see.
Here,
it.
these are these again, yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Because we're trying to tilt toward the light.
Wait,
I'm
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because, okay, yeah. Okay, now you said adding 40,000 on the AV?
I was suggesting, if we know we're gonna replace the high school, if we, the old one. That's the old one. This is after I've analyzed the high school program.
Okay.
Yes.
Um,
Nice, thanks.
so again, what we said we really needed to add to that high school was 90,000+ for it to serve 1,800 kids, okay? At the end of phase one, we have 1,800 kids in that high school. So a 40,000, I'm just saying a 40,000 square foot addition, it's still gonna be tight. But I don't wanna, if we know that a new high school is coming online in phase two, I don't wanna add 90,000 square feet to that high school in phase one.
And I'd add that you don't, if you add 40,000, you have to go back for another vote to get the money to build a second high school.
Yes.
If that takes 2 extra years, you now have 2,200 people in that high school built for 1,500. Because you didn't do the full expansion up front,
Correct.
and you can't, and where do you put the extra grade? In the growth,
You're right.
right?
Mhm.
There's really, if we wanna try and avoid throwing good money after bad, there's only one answer here, in my opinion. 2C, or 2B, no, 2C,
One of the twos.
2Cs.
Any of,
was
all
a
the
joke.
twos put a new high school in phase
To be.
one.
So I think that's what.
To be or not to be?
Uh,
To be or not to be? It's 2C or not 2C? Because if you're,
Well,
the
and,
sales plan for 2C is, the district gets a new high school, the elementary level kids get new buildings on the east side of the district and on the west side of the district. We got a little Miami East, we got a little Miami West, and we have core services in grades 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you have a very consolidated design that does allow you to scale
right,
long-term, but right now, everybody's covered, the district gets people across the district get everything. Somebody across the district gets everything.
Right,
No one's left out.
but the big thing is
It's a big price.
that to pass a bond issue,
But-
to do that, we're asking people to,
Well, probably the other answer is you're gonna ask them to pay 3/4 of it now, then come back for 50% more and pay 125%.
But I think a lot can
In
happen
5
between
years.
now and then. We need to look at phase one to the end and maybe the start of two, but I think a
But you,
lot of things can change between
Right.
now and then. Listen, I
well, it
see
could
the
even get
enrollment,
worse
I know
from a
it's up.
state funding perspective,
I
right?
understand that, but what I'm saying is, this takes care of 1A, 1B, those take care of it without a new high school. I think you hear a lot of things from parents out there that do not want a new high school, they wanna see the elementary kids get a new building. Teachers are voicing that opinion.
And then 2C gives every elementary kid a new, modern, half of them get less than,
And we have
less than a
three-year-olds,
5-year-old building.
3-year-olds in a building that was created for 5th and 6th graders, so they're moving to the intermediate. Is that correct?
No, they come here.
They'll
These becomes the new elementary building.
That is built for kindergarten.
So the new wing they're building
Will
is
be
gonna be
built
for
for kindergarten
the
and preschool.
kindergarten.
yeah,
So who's in this section that is here now?
first through third.
First through third.
Yep.
I like the idea of the new elementaries, and I just from what I hear, the high school thing,
well, I'd like to see it all.
yeah. Oh, well, yeah, let's get them all in. Let's get an option that has all new building.
But one of the things Christy and I talked a few weeks ago is, the part that makes it challenging is, your challenge is on the low end meaning your younger grades,
Right.
because they're in your 100-year-old buildings.
Right,
And your problem is at the upper end, because in 2 years, that building that says can house 1,500 really can't.
Right.
And you're gonna be over that before, if we were to break ground now, you couldn't,
right,
you're gonna be over so you have
Right.
problems on the bottom end and the top
Right.
end, grade level wise.
Yeah.
And in the middle, where we built new buildings here and at the junior high, you have some flexibility because they're newer buildings and they have the ability to expand.
But we still have to build them out.
And outside the width of the stairways, that shows the floor planning that the previous boards put into this. We haven't wasted anything, we've spent the last bond issue building stuff that we can use today,
Yeah.
and we can use for many years into the future, and we're not throwing more money after sinkholes that need to be replaced. And 2C replaces the aged infrastructure that we have in this community.
I agree.
The other element too is the sticker shock of the new buildings is gonna be there regardless, whether it's, whether it's 100 million or 140 million,
Right.
that's not gonna sway, right? I mean, I think we should be doing what collectively everyone feels is the best bet for the kids in the district. Because when you spread that out, amortize that out over the 35 years, the difference in that cost is small compared to the other critical discussion that needs to happen, is how much operating funds do you drive to go with this, right?
Yeah.
So I think you do want to solve for the long term, because you want that story for the community of how you're leveraging what has been done in the past, you're building upon it, you're not spending good money after bad in an interim plan that you're just gonna come and ask for more, because we're gonna be asking the community to provide a huge amount of funding. When you combine this bond and what's required from a levy perspective. So it's critical you do it right, because you're not gonna have the luxury to come back with
Well,
anything
and-
significant. right?
Yeah, and some of my concern with continuing to add on to the high school is that it really was not designed to be any bigger than it currently is. So any addition that we add is going to have sacrifices to it. It's gonna start to feel a lot like Salem, where it's addition after addition after addition, because you just kept adding on. And I'm concerned about a building that could, as is, fit a middle school and fit that child and age enrollment just fine. I'm worried about if we try and force it to be a high school and continue to add on, that we're really compromising the high school environment for those kids. Just so that we can say it's still a high school.
So John, you like the C2C?
To the, hey Christie, to the
Yeah,
crazy high level question, but to the point of 2C. So I think in your original assessment of the buildings, when you did like an overall, like on a
Right.
10-point scale, the
right,
newer buildings were all pretty good. I think they were
Right.
like 9s out of 10s.
Overall, right,
yes.
And we
yeah.
talk about the OFCC, Greg tells us we are nowhere on the horizon for OFCC dollars.
514 on the list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
If we're
correct.
looking
We
at
used to
building,
be closer than that.
Well,
You're getting
your
too low.
number would come up and then you cycle back down to the bottom of the list.
and
You're about
so
4.5
we're
years
using
away.
OFCC as the golden rule in all of this.
We're using it as a benchmark.
Right, it's a baseline.
Right, yes.
When we go, but
And it's
you know-
important to note that the basis, that OFCC, those numbers really are generated through a lot of research on
Right.
schools all over the country, so it's
But
not
the current
just-
buildings
Yeah.
that weren't built to OFCC standards,
Yeah.
you gave very favorable, that's my question.
Um,
When we go to put a shovel in the ground and build this,
Mhm.
do we have to build at that standard and it's 140 million? Or is it somewhere between what we did 15 years ago and OFCC and it's 110,
Well,
or
so
it's 120?
keep in mind what we were evaluating was the spaces, how they currently operate.
Right.
Your spaces in those buildings, in the intermediate and in the junior high, operate just fine. That assessment didn't show you that you were lacking labs. We went in and said, here's a classroom, yeah, your classrooms are nice classrooms in these buildings.
So
They do what they
districts-
need to do.
Districts building today that aren't getting OFCC money, are they
Yes.
building OFCC standard?
They're typically
they
building
come up with-
above OFCC
Yeah.
standard. Most districts choose not to do OFCC because they want more. Very few districts go less than OFCC. Normally, OFCC is the starting point for most school districts. Your intermediate and your junior high and your high school all well exceed OFCC standards in terms of corridor and building service square footage. So if you look at any of these, you have thousands of square feet more in those buildings than what OFCC would allow you to have if they came in. and
But the
built it.
classrooms and some of
The
them.
classrooms are smaller, your corridors are bigger, yes, your classrooms are 750 square feet, OFCC would say the smallest would be 810. So you're close, you're not that far off.
But you would say we would be able to find data and research that would justify it, that we could articulate to the community why we need the square footage that we need in our
Yes,
final
yes,
recommendation.
yes, absolutely,
So I think that will be
Yes.
critical, to be
yes.
able to state
Well,
some
and that's the
facts that
next,
support
that's
it,
the
because-
next step, that once we can decide on an option, if it is that we're gonna build a new high school, the next step is starting with an OFCC suggested program and sitting down with you guys and going space by space to determine, do we need all of this? Can some of this get smaller? What's missing? Because a lot of times there's what's missing. So the square footages that I've put in for a new high school, that's what OFCC would suggest for a new high school. The problem is OFCC doesn't co-fund an auditorium. Well, chances are, if we build a new high school, you're gonna want an auditorium. So we would need to add that. But maybe we don't need 900 square foot classrooms, maybe we're okay with 800 square foot classrooms or whatever. So that's the next, that's
So
the
we
next.
fine-tune it, is
That
what
we
you're
need to
saying.
fine tune it, we need to take the square footage that we're suggesting and just make sure that we're okay with it.
Okay, but, so let's say we come up with the option that we want, we fine tuned it,
Mhm.
then we've gotta sit down and decide what we're going out for a millage and what we're going to ask for the fund and for operating, is that correct?
Parking operating.
What?
We've gotta do something along those lines, otherwise what you have to do once you build the building is you have to go back out and say.
I
"No,
know,
you need this."
and I don't wanna do that.
No, so we would have to roll that in, and when you do that, I mean, the millage is gonna be pretty significant, depending upon.
Which option?
Yeah, which
What
option
we
we
do.
do.
Right.
Well, as John was saying, the bond millage is, I mean, you can move from 100 million to almost 115 million, you're only talking $1 million difference.
Right.
And you added $15 million, because you amortize over so long, but it's the operating millage that, yeah, the current, that's just like our emergency levy, it's just the same setup.
And your operating
Same here.
millage just keeps changing as we
Right.
grow.
As we grow.
We've kicked this can around forever
Yes.
of how do we deal with growing school districts? And how do you fund growing school districts? Okay? I have my own opinion about this, of how our district is set up. We seem to be right down the middle. When I say we're right down the middle, when we look at every one of our bonds, every time we've tried to pass a bond, we have been almost equally split. And I don't care if it's a fire levy that we're passing, I don't care what the levy's for. And I think what we're dealing with, and I keep saying this, is we have families who are property less rich, but income high. And then we have the families, the agriculture, and we have the retirees who are property rich, but income poor. And if you look how these things go, if you look at who votes for the levies, it's the people who are property poor and income rich. And I keep saying, we do nothing to address, if we do a 15 mil or whatever we do, that's what we raise. And we raise that, and if we have 200 new kids coming again next year, we have the same amount of money to deal with it. Where if we did something with an earnings tax or something along that line, just for the, I'm gonna say just for the operations side. If we could do something along those lines, and I know there's a lot of people who are saying, well, we don't wanna upset the new people who are moving here, and I agree with that, but I say we already have people who are upset, and no matter how you get in somebody's pocket, we're gonna have a hard time convincing them to do it. At least this is something that, one, I can tell John, I can tell the other people within our district here who have a higher income, and not saying that they don't have the same kind of property that a farm or somebody like that has. But I can say to them, at least we're dealing with the growth issue. We're trying to deal with the growth issue. I keep saying this is something that we have to look at when we're doing it. And right now, probably not the best time to to be talking about this, but I think somewhere along the way, we gotta start looking at this, and we've gotta come up with what our option is soon. We've done a lot of talking tonight, but we've gotta come up with something, because the people sitting around this room are gonna be the ones selling it. And, you know, I think y'all know, you got me on board, but you gotta give me something to sell, and, to the voters, and you gotta give me something that will sell. Or, you know, we're all just spitting on this.
I think one of the realities too that we talked with the earnings tax is just because of the income base, or the earnings base, I think we determined that 1% would be like 9 million.
About
Right.
9.6, yeah.
9 to 10 million, so that's only
The portion
depending on
of
where
it,
we
yeah.
land, a portion or a small portion, of the need.
So,
So.
so 1% income tax would be just about equal to the levy renewal we passed.
Well,
Earnings
For
tax.
the-
mills now.
Yeah.
You're not talking income tax, earnings tax.
About 1.1.
Careful with your words.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You heard
earnings
us
is,
once.
what we wanna do is an earnings tax.
Right.
But they're about,
comparable.
but they're about
A little bit
comparable.
less.
Very close to the,
And do you feel like, to the BAC members, that it would behoove us as a school district to have some kind of balance between the property tax that is in place and an earnings tax, so that helps us balance out where those funds are coming from over the long term? Because with the earnings tax, there is some, as more people build houses and move in and have children, there is some built-in mechanism to have some
I'd say
additional
my 2
revenue.
cents worth first, I mean, yes, I think down the road, because I think when you have a bond and an operating need, I mean, if we do a bond and a operating request split between both property tax and earnings, we're just gonna confuse the heck out of everybody.
This has to be
So I think it needs to be
a decision.
clean,
This has to be a
articulated
binary.
well, and then down the road, that could be
Well,
another
because
avenue.
the operating levy, the emergency levy renewal is down the road a few years, but if we're looking 6 months from now,
Right.
in my own mind, the idea is to do whatever we decide we're gonna do from a brick and mortar standpoint, and then try to do some kind of earnings tax as a way to offset the operating, and then
That would be an option.
deal with your,
So, Terry, the projections you guys are, maybe John, you did this, is an earnings tax deferred implementation in this schedule and would only start when the buildings come online? Are we thinking that approach with
I
this?
think what we have said is we would look to not defer it,
yeah.
because we would wanna get the benefit of it.
There's an 18-month lag time on
As
closing.
Yeah,
soon as
there's a
possible
lag,
to
big
lower
lag
it.
time.
I understand, but we have enough with the 1395 renewal to get through our current facilities and support the occupation of instructors and staff to support the current buildings. We need to collect the money for the bonds right away, obviously, but can we defer a year, 18 months to a future date when the earnings would kick in?
It's really kind of hard to delineate those
Yeah.
two, I think, because
Yeah.
I mean, the reality of it is, the growth, that we've based what the millage need is on just a general growth that would require the building growth to facilitate it, right? So, I mean, we have a range, so exclude the actual bond millage of, call it 6 to 9.
Yeah, bond is,
Outside of that,
bond's done.
depending on what the district spends at, we would need an additional 22 to 37 mils on top of that, including, that would be including the renewal. That would be about 12 and a half on today's rate. So it's a significant increased need. That's what we would need to get through 2025. right?
So
So that's,
you're saying we would not renew the emergency levy if the earnings passed? Is that what I just
no,
heard?
we would need
You have to have
to
both.
renew it
We need both, yeah.
and more.
Try to make it permanent, to look into that, but at some
Well-
point, it needs to not be a 5-year emergency.
Right, I get that.
We would
but-
need more on top of that, actually.
What it boils down to is, it's easier to pass the bond issue if it's
Right.
just the bond issue, but that gives
Not
us
necessarily.
it gives us a greater propensity to open these buildings and then be asking for a gargantuan operating need if we don't pick something up sooner, and being back in a situation with opening new buildings that we can't afford to operate, which is the bad taste in everyone's mouth in the district.
The most optimistic path would be if the board held spending to 4.5% over the next 10 years. And we would be able to then renew the operating levy, or the emergency levy, and add a 15 mil bond / operating levy on top of it. And that's the most optimistic based on spending levels that no one's aligned to. The least optimistic would mean instead of that 15, it would need to be over 30.
I thought you
If that
said
doesn't
that,
include any, but that's only millage based, not earnings based.
Correct.
Well, that's what he's saying, is that's
Between
most
either,
optimistic.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
Well,
that's the
that's
millage
right.
that you would then split.
Right, but when you sell the message,
Get to it, you
Yeah.
have to start.
it's easier, I think it might be easier to say, we're gonna build a building, we're gonna implement an earnings tax to support the long-term operation of the district going forward.
It's gonna alleviate
It just
the
wouldn't
need
be
for
enough
more property
then
tax.
to only renew the emergency. It'd still be short by a lot. If we continue to
Terry,
go.
Terry, this might be a question for you. Say you did run a bond issue with, quote, millage for operating on it. The bond issue runs for, what, approximately 35 years, something like that?
38, 35.
Would that
What we
millage
do.
run 35?
The operating part?
Yes.
Depends if we run as a continuing
Wanna
or
make it a
what,
problem,
yeah.
yeah.
We probably run as a continuing.
So it
or
just depends on
it
how it's
would run
written out?
forever. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
okay. But it
They're
would,
two separate.
so they would have to be two separate items.
You could run them together, but I mean, they would
On the
run
ballot?
separately. Once the debt's paid off, it's done, the continuing operating would continue.
It has to be
Or
together.
can it
Don't
be
do
together
this
on the
two
ballot? Is
thing.
my-
Yeah, yeah.
So,
You can link them.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's-
It's either
that's-
yes
that's-
for
Yeah,
both.
yeah, you
or
have
no.
that.
So they can't,
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, you
don't,
can
please
put them
don't
together
do two.
No, that doesn't.
You can do, yeah.
Hey,
Either.
Christie,
Yeah,
most districts in this situation having this conversation over when and how much operating, and say it boils down to, we're pretty much at two options for the bond. Is it valuable in your opinion to continue to go to the district and get input, or for the powers that be to make those decisions? When we went and had all these community meetings and we've had people put a survey in, is there value in putting two options out there and this is what it costs you, which are you likely to support?
I don't think,
Or is that ridiculous?
personally, I think we are at the point where you guys need to make a
Yeah,
decision.
yeah. I think we have to.
I think we've asked all the questions that, I think we've done our due diligence, we've asked the questions we should ask. Some of these options are closer to what the community voiced than others. But I think that we've heard everything we need to hear. I think now it's time to just say, okay, taking everything into account, we gotta move forward.
well, I agree with John, because I think if we go with the option 1A or B, we're gonna throw good money after bad, and that's gonna leave not a good taste in people's mouths, because that's how they felt when we built the new building and didn't have the operating, and here we are gonna go throwing, and then the buildings aren't even set up after we've spent all that money in them for what we need. So I agree with John, once you get the sticker shock, they're gonna have the sticker shock everywhere you go. That difference isn't gonna make a difference, but it addresses all the issues at one time.
And I think long-term, if you look at phase one and phase two, if we were to go with option 2C, it is one of the cheapest options, because it is looking long-term.
Yes.
And it's
And
solving
you
your
can,
problems
and you can
long-term.
sell that, you
Yes.
can say,
But it's a little heavier up,
long-term,
it's a little
this is-
heavier on the
Of
front end,
course,
right?
it's heavier on the front end,
Right.
yes, but option 1A and 1B are both more expensive long-term, because you're holding, obviously,
Right,
you're
but
holding on,
because-
and,
but when you're selling this to a community, you can say, we're looking out for
right,
the long term of the whole district, and what's best for the whole district.
right.
I mean, it's better to be, I think, high on the front end now, instead of going November of 2025 and being like, oh, well, now we need this gargantuan amount compared to what you had before, and they'll be like, why didn't you fix all this when we did this 8 years ago? You knew what we needed. So, and in 8 years,
Well,
we might not have grown as much as we thought. We
You
may
might.
have grown,
or you might have grown at 300 students a year instead of 200, in which case having right now a smaller phase two is nice because it does give us a buffer to be able to add to that if your enrollment is more than what we anticipated.
This past Sunday's Pulse Journal had an article in it that I tweeted out. It was housing starts, permits approved with Hamlin Township leading the region
Yep.
for this past year.
Oh, great.
And Melinda has been looking at available developments in, down here on 48, there's a 323 acre plot of land that has been zoned residential, and the developer's going in there. Over toward where the Sumco plant is, there's another several hundred acre piece of land, and that's zoned commercial, and they're asking to have it rezoned residential.
I heard there was a big company coming in where some go.
There is something coming in over there, a manufacturing company, and they're working over there. There's actually talk of another road across the 22 as a part of that development. I talked to the township, and when they have the zoning hearing, we're gonna go say that we don't want that commercial property rezoned. We need more business to support the residential infrastructure, so, there's every indicator that actually our growth projection is conservative.
I will tell you, I work with the auditor on streets for the database and transportation, and 2 years ago, I got a standardized street list from them, and I just did it again about a week and a half ago, and there are 38 new streets in the Little Wayne School District, than I had 2 years ago. 38 new streets with houses on them. So, we're growing quick.
Also, the state legislature is currently looking, there's been a, overall, through the state, CAUV tax on agricultural land. In the last 2-year biennial budget, the agricultural CAUV rates have increased statewide 46%. And the state legislature, I think that you're gonna see them act to put a cap 4 or 5% on that, for the farmers. So that will then shift the tax structure on all of our, like our emergency levy, that piece will shift back over to residential then when that cap happens. I'm pretty sure that cap's gonna happen for the farmers,
They're gonna cap it at what?
4 to 5%.
4 to 5, that's what they're saying. But you're getting a lot of pushback, because now you're seeing a lot of production farms coming into Ohio now. If you
In
have a
southeast
corporation,
Ohio,
you can
there's a
have
county
farm.
where the CAUV tax increased 200%.
Yep.
It went up 200%.
Well, and then I guess now the townships can do some additional things. In Milford, there's a guy right down there that, he's got about 300 acres, and they just jacked his taxes up some unbelievable amount. He's gotta sell the property, because they don't want the agriculture. Yeah.
Right, so that adds to the drawing board.
It's gotta eat, Rusty. That's right.
That's all that impact.
It's gonna be more of us tomorrow than there is today. Be more food, not less.
John, is there anything else that you have that you wanna, please say from the BAC standpoint?
Just what we started talking about, I think it's imperative that we get on top of the operating need as part of, going to the ballot, right? And I think there is potential, you could see a scenario where it's an earnings tax and the bond levy, and that's probably not as high as we would like to get in, but that could be an option that is a strong one for the long-term planning. But that was the one thing I, shared with the board, that the BAC is happy to meet with a few of you to walk through and really look at all of the different options. We can start with a dozen of them, winnow it down to the top 3 or 4, come back with a recommendation, to the full board of what makes the most sense long-term, right? Because you could see a cascading need for, levy requests to the community. That would include when we go for the bond, it could include when we do the renewal or the permanent, hopefully making that a continuing. And then, maybe even shortly thereafter, you need to come back for more. And that's where, don't wanna sound like a broken record, but how much we're spending plays significantly into what that long-term need is, and, if we don't address that, we're starting to get to untenable levels of millage that, we're gonna create a bigger issue by not addressing the spending. But, I think the nearest term need is just try to come to the place where, we can ask for the most amount of operating, and the story behind that when we go for the bond. And that's the first step in this journey, which I think we need by early May, right, for the, to be ready for the ballot?
That'd be the smart move. I mean, I think we can go to June, maybe even right at the beginning of July, actually. They still be enough days out before November, but I'd rather be a little sooner than later, personally.
How many?
60.
How many days now is it, Terry?
Yeah, it's like
It'll be
100.
90 and
Oh,
105.
105.
105 and then 90.
And there's also an issue where we're gonna have to go to the Ohio Department of Tax and get a special request in a letter, because our debt limitations, you're not allowed certain percentages by law, and we're gonna be way beyond this. We only got like 27 million to work with, to be within those limitations. So we have to get, actually literally an approval from the Ohio Department of Tax to put this on. And on the flip side, from talking to our, bond counsel, Tom Wilson, not a big deal at all. They do it all the time. It's just, we have to make sure we get it done, and that's around the 90-day mark. I think there's a, the window where you have to it's funny, they count the 90 days, you have to so much by the county auditor, so much by the Ohio Department of Tax. ODE might have a little piece in there too. Get all this done, but, so we'll have to get a letter from the Ohio Department of Tax that says you guys are good to go. Like I said, should be an issue. Just a legal thing.
Christie, did you have any additional things?
I did not. Did you, was there anything else that we need to talk about?
When we talk about Morrow, I think last month during the work session, I shared some information that Christie had sent me regarding, they take it down from the inside rebuild option versus, a demolition of the site. It was from Sunesis. There was a bid there.
Hey, Greg, has the paras, or that, the group that was with Mr. Raines and that group, have they contacted you at all in the last?
There's not been any further contact or dialogue.
John, did you want to comment on
I
that?
can,
Yeah.
I can add a little bit to that. I met with Carolyn and Mike over the weekend. What their concerns are about taking this building all the way down, not just the historical significance of it, but what you end up with after it's gone. Because basically, if you take it all the way down, you have two level buildings, lots in the floodplain. And what I'm hearing is the site's not big enough to accommodate your bus garage. Mike and Carolyn both have agreed to at least be a part and try and facilitate some sort of possibly adult education. I know that, I think Steve had talked to you a little
David
bit.
called me sometime ago, yeah.
And they reference like a school for nursing, that there's a need for that here in Ohio, and, that they're both OSU. And they're both saying that they really don't feel that OSU is going to be the implement to do that, but there are others, and they would be willing to network and help facilitate something along those lines. Their main concern is they don't want to see the building completely razed, even if it's a matter that we just save it or we go back to some sort of a group like a CUC, I think I'm pronouncing that right, CIC, a Community Improvement Corporation. Perhaps, that way it stays within the community. You can shed that, but there are, to me, I think there's things that the school system owes the community. And that one being that if we're going to say, well, we'll move the bus facility to Mainville, perhaps there's enough room there where we can work together as a CUC and have a commitment from the school that we have our administrative offices or some kind of a presence there. I keep bringing up the library. I think the library could use a new home for sure, and get that out of the private sector. They pay rent. I'm not sure what that amount is, but there's rent. to me, the library is in need of space. You guys are always talking about needing space for wrestling and other places. Well, perhaps that could be intramural. There's a lot to offer at Morrow Elementary. And when I sit down and talk with the paras, you know, both of them are on board to do something. I haven't even begun to ask anybody else to you know, be involved in this. Because I wasn't sure what your game plan was for that building. We've talked about a lot of things. And I know we heard a lot from the community as well. But I can at least tell you that there, you know, I wish I had more concrete, but, you know, there's nothing concrete right now. You know, the building's not gonna go anywhere for a little while, so if you say, yes, start working towards that, I'm telling you, I'm volunteering to be involved in that, to keep it from being completely torn down.
So John, will they buy the building? We put it up for sale, they'll buy it from us and get it off our hands?
I'm gonna say that what my opinion of this is that we would form a CUC, a CIC.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
And-
I don't know what that is.
It's a jointly governed organization,
Right.
community improvement corporations.
And it does, it's not the Village of we don't, yes, it could be the Village of Morrow, but it could be,
So the school would join that?
It would cost us money to do that, though?
No, I
It's
think,
not really gonna
you could
cost
try,
money.
I think,
right.
You were talking
We
donate
would
or
generate-
sell it for a dollar.
To me.
When you hear like 3CDC in downtown, like OTR,
There you go.
that's what it is. So then that entity that's separate will go seek private investment, public funds, any entity that would
But
be
what's the
interested.
school district's fiscal responsibility to
Well,
that?
that's give them a
Sell it or
separate
donate
entity.
it.
Sell it,
Okay,
donate it,
okay,
or
that's good.
donate.
Okay, so it's not something
Okay.
we would keep
Well,
they would
maintaining.
that.
There's a legal issue here that we can't donate anything.
Right.
No.
We have to
We
sell
have
it.
to- We have to put it up for
For
auction,
bid, right.
Yeah.
and.
Right, we have to go through the steps, so they
Yeah,
just.
So
and
I-
if there is no bid on it that meets the, whatever the current market rate is on it, then the board is free to do whatever it wants. It could sell it for a minimal amount, or,
Okay, so if we know there's this interest out there, the five of us would sit, talk about it and say, yes, let's put it for auction. And we can start that
I
process.
mean, you could start
get
that
rid of
process right now to see if there is any interest in somebody, but it would, if you got the minimum bid, the board would be
You have to
obligated
honor
to
it.
sell it to whoever submitted the minimum bid,
Okay,
or best bid beyond the minimum.
Yeah, then it may wind up in somebody else's hands.
but
Well, I know-
Steve,
I know
you
last
know what
month we
our,
talked
if we
about-
were to sell that, do you know what our obligation might be related to remediating
I
any
don't know,
conditions?
Terry, do you know? They can just sell it as is, you just
We
have to
can.
disclose everything about the building.
Yeah, you have to look
It's a
the
full
buying
speed.
party needs to
Yeah.
know what
We
they're
certainly
buying.
have
They
had
need to
it
know what they're
assessed,
getting into.
so they
Yeah,
know what
several
they're getting into.
What were you
Right.
saying,
So you're saying we don't have to go to
Tony?
auction, was that what you're saying?
We do.
No.
No, you do, but I don't think you
It's
have to,
like
I don't
as
think
is,
you have to
as
go
is,
to, I don't think you
whereas-
have to abate it. I think you
Right.
can sell it as is, that whoever's buying it understands what they're
Right,
getting.
yeah, but you have to do full disclosure, right?
I think maybe a key message to the community would be, you've determined that there isn't a use for the school district, and you wanted to notify the community, and you will plan on scheduling an auction for a year from now, or, you know, pick whatever the date is to give these,
Next
you know,
week.
other organizations an opportunity to do their research, whatever, you know, whatever you think is appropriate. But I think the key message from you all would be, it's not gonna be used for the school district. I mean, we're looking at options for other, disposal.
What are your thoughts on that? Mike, what's your thoughts?
Well, we need to say what we're gonna do with it, that's definite. I don't, you know, we can auction it off, I don't wanna put a lot of money into it.
Right,
No.
no, I agree with you on that.
No.
I just can't do that, but if we can get those people that John knows that wanna go into it and buy it, or whatever they wanna do with it, a CIC, whatever, I think we need to get it off our books one way or the other,
ASAP.
because I don't think, I've been in the community for 30 years, I love the community, I love the people, but there's people still out here that are saying, hey, you have a building. We're not gonna pass a levy to build a new building when you have one sitting there. That's just the way that the people that I love out here are.
Couldn't agree with you more.
So, you know, we've got to do something with it and then move on.
We
And
talked
then,
about it.
John, what would, let me ask this, you were talking about.
Whatever we
this.
do.
What would it, what kind of, timeframe would a CIC need to be put together? Is it just corporation papers? What, I mean, what,
Yeah,
what is it?
but I mean, I think we're looking at a minimum of 90 days to put anything together that would have any direction whatsoever. And quite honestly, it's gonna take some leaders from within this community that wanna be involved in it. And, you know, it's not necessarily a money issue as much as it is a time issue and a vision issue, in my opinion,
I agree.
in my opinion, for what it's worth.
I guess I think it's a huge money, there's a huge money element to this. I mean, it's
It's
the
millions.
ability to maintain that site and do
Yeah.
something with that
It's
site.
gotta be, everything's money. Come on.
Well, yeah.
So
Bottom
I
line.
just wouldn't minimize the
Bottom line.
element of
Okay.
needing to
Maybe I misspoke, that when I'm saying money issue, it's not, to me, it's not a member, it's not an idea that the members of the CIC have to have all the funding. Once you form a community corporation like that, one, you're bonding yourself, you're binding your power together, you know, and it all depends on who we're putting on this committee or this board. And the
And
other
then you
side of
would
that
say
is that opens doors for us. Bricks and mortar, it's hard to find funding for any kind of bricks and mortar right now, but we are blessed here in Warren County to have the Warren County Foundation, and we do have some strong local banks that when you do have community interests like this, it's a little easier for them to work with us to make some things happen. I'm apprehensive about letting go of that building and saying that it's moving from a community building that the school board has, the authority over it now, and turning it into private sector, completely private sector. And that's where I think you get into a lot of money with it, is when it goes private sector, you have to have that money up front, basically, or a bit of it, or the ability to borrow the money. Where with the CIC, I think you're gonna find it's gonna be a little easier to find funding with that. And it also gets the people that I'm talking about, who are part of the community, it's gonna make it a lot easier to pass your levies, guys. I don't know a better way of wording it just than that. From just what you said, you know, people aren't gonna pass a levy if you say, well, we're gonna go in and dose that building. I don't see
I
that.
agree with that.
It's gonna be a hard pass any way we go, but if you, it's gonna be a hard pass. And if the feeling is that the school board has walked away from the community, believe me, it's gonna get even tougher than you ever dreamed. And I'm not saying that to be threatening or anything else, I'm just trying to be realistic about it.
But see,
That's why I suggested some due diligence period, right?
That's what I was gonna say.
You open it up to, you know, folks to share with you, do they really have a plan, do they really have a vision that
Right.
has some
Because we've
probability of
talked about,
happening?
it's been on the table a
If
long
yes,
time.
then maybe you extend, but if no, you go to the community and say, you know, we've exhausted
Right,
all that.
that's exactly right, that's exactly right.
but I guess I'd counter John's statement, is that there's over 22,000 registered voters in this community now. And there's probably a few hundred vocal people that say they want their buildings kept, but there's a silent majority that say we want better education for our kids, better, more current facilities, and we don't really care what buildings kept. We want good teachers and good buildings, get a good education. And that's the message that the campaign would have to run to elicit the support of the community. And yeah, there could be a few out there that really will object. As you know, by the last vote, we did, or 2 votes ago, we won by 63 or 72 votes. So it's very, as you split, as you said, John. The renewal was a different story, much higher percentage. That could be indicative of the community's support of the actions of the school board and the district. So I wouldn't put I think you guys have to do what's right for the community and what's right for your charter is education. It's other people's, the community councils, the township councils, to focus on their communities and what the infrastructure needs to be there. And John, if you can do that, great, right? And if Hamilton Township wants to form one, or someone wants to form one to take over Mainville, that maybe is an option, but then that also raises issues that you now have to find another 20, 30 acre site for a bus depot and maintenance facility if you were planning to reuse Mainville's property for that.
It's big enough.
Mainville's big enough, you'd have to remove the building, I mean, the site is big enough.
I was thinking it was.
I was just looking for some guidance. I know we've been talking about this for 3 years.
Yeah.
We've had various iterations of different groups coming and talking about possibilities for the building over the last 3 years. My concern is that whatever evolves here with this, I know last board meeting, I think I got a sense that the board was really looking at the possibility of a demolition of the site, of doing something rather than leaving the building continue to sit there vacant. As I mentioned, we just had another break-in down there, more damage, we tried the reboard thing. I was out here Saturday morning and drove through the lot. There's a couple more broken windows in the back end of the building. You know, we've tried to protect the property and lock it down. I don't want whatever is gonna go on here to start to muddy the levee. I'm kind of sitting here in a deja vu state of mind where we've had the village talking about it, we've had other people talking about the site and what to do with it, and it could be used. I don't think have money to put skin in the game to do a collaborative anything with that site. So I'm just looking, your staff's looking for some guidance here. If we need to start the process for filling the first square, which is to put it up to auction and see what happens, so that then the board has the flexibility to be able to act more efficiently in the event that there is somebody that wants to buy the site as is, that we would have the capability to do that. So, I think there's an ad in the paper that you have to put, I think we retain. We
But
get sealed
I agree
bids.
with John that
Yeah.
we should
Debate process.
let the community know that, we've talked to people, we've exhausted, things, and then,
But I think since we waited so long, I don't have a problem waiting 90 days if
I don't
we can
either.
put that together. I think that's the win-all situation.
Well,
we can do
but
that.
I'm not disagreeing with Greg either.
Yeah.
To start the process as far, to me, if you wanna move something, you wanna get people off of dead center and find out
Exactly.
how many people are really upset or not upset or couldn't care less or whatever. 90% of the people don't say anything till it's already over with, and then they're gonna fall and have their complaints no matter what. The only thing that I'm saying is that this thorn has been in your side for quite a while.
Yes, it is.
And the community has felt that thorn. It's not just you all that are
Right.
feeling that
True.
thorn. The community has felt it. I think we have to we have to do exactly what John said. Exhaust all of our efforts to find a solution to it. But I still think it's probably a wise idea to at least get your process started so that you can have a conversation. By having a conversation, I'm saying, that way it may not be of value, or we could even get 5 people together to be a community improvement corporation. And once we find out, well, it's gonna have this value, and somebody from the private sector
No, I
is willing
agree.
to step up and take it off your hands. And then you have a decision to make, and at least it helps you to make that decision.
I'm gonna say this as a 5 of you, and I don't mind one bit that everybody else hears it. 4 of you plus myself. We're gonna have a Butlerville site, we're gonna have a Mainville elementary site, and we have a Morrow site. And after whatever option we choose, whether it's 2A, 1B, it makes no difference to me, but you're gonna have 3 sites, and you're still gonna need a central office, and you're gonna need a transportation facility. And we should probably have a plan that we can articulate on those 3 sites,
Yeah.
Morrow, Butlerville, Mainville. And if it includes being able to repurpose one of those sites, 2 of those sites, to take care of those other issues that really are not addressed in the options we're talking about, because those options do not address central office space, and they don't really address transportation, but we're gonna have 3 sites.
Right.
And regardless of who likes it or who doesn't like it, my own personal opinion is our central office should be either in Morrow or it should be in Mainville. And then if it's not in Mainville, then we need to look at making the transportation facility in Mainville, so we can at least say to people, we're not just going to abandon 3 elementary sites and ask the community to support 2 or 3 new buildings. I think that will get a tremendous amount of pushback, and I also think one of the things, we're gonna get pushback regardless, and as much of it as you can mitigate from the different communities, it only helps you try to move forward what you're trying to move forward. And there very well may be enough people in Hamilton Township and Mainville that we can just do whatever we want and still pass it. That may very well be the case. But my own personal belief is, you better figure out how to mitigate the pushback you're gonna get from Morrow, Butlerville, from those in Salem Township, if we just try to just abandon those 3 sites and build new.
Well,
And
Salem,
that's
they're
mine.
gonna put a new building on, right?
Correct. Correct. That site will be replaced with a new building, but you're gonna have a Morrow
Yeah,
site,
that's
a
it.
Butlerville
Right,
site,
that's
and a
the one we
Mainville site.
picked, right.
Right, but, you know, but Salem cover is in this Village of Morrow. So the Village of Morrow will now get a a pretty
Correct.
good sized tax increase, a valuation increase. Unfortunately, there may be some transportation changes to the roads, because if you're gonna put 800,000 kids back there, that's a few more buses.
Well, right now, there's 1,000 kids that work.
But that site's a
Just
wash,
1,000.
because you have 1,000 student elementary, and you're gonna replace it with 1,000 students, so that site is a wash.
It's a wash.
But you're gonna have the other 3 sites that are not gonna be a wash, because we haven't even really discussed what to do with those 3 sites.
And those in the current Salem building are just gonna move, in theory, move back to the new Salem building, so there's really gonna be, it's gonna be a wash. There's not
That's
gonna be.
that's a zero-sum game for the most part. So,
Till things.
Although the Mainville children are getting to go into a new building.
correct.
And there is definitely
I think
something to
Mainville
say
All-
for
all the-
all of those kids, Butlerville and
All
Mainville,
the-
being able to attend
All the K,
an
PK
updated
through 3 are
building,
moving to a new building.
with knowing that as
Would move to
enrollment
a new
continues to grow, new buildings will most likely be pushing further and further out into their direction when the enrollment is out there to be able to support
I guess what I'm
it.
saying is, if someone were to say to me that we're gonna, when all this is said and done, we're gonna move the central office to Mainville, to that building, I would be okay with that. If someone says to me, we're gonna move the transportation facility to Mainville, I would be okay with that.
Just use it.
If someone says, we're gonna use the Morrow site, and we're gonna put the money in it and make it a central office, okay, I might go along if you twisted my arm hard enough, but what I can't go along with is to abandon those 3 sites and not have some kind of plan
And then
to
go somewhere else and say.
to
No, I agree.
repurpose
I
those
agree
3
with
sites into something, would be,
We
I
have
think
to.
would be,
It would help push.
you're just creating more opposition to yourself than what you're already gonna get in the first place.
That's correct, that's correct. And then, I mean, the 3 factors is we have to determine what we're gonna do and what the optics are, what it's gonna cost, and then how much it's gonna cost to operate. And is that a saleable?
Well, we already looked at Morrow and the cost of,
No, I'm talking about when we put it all together, when we put everything together, we have to be able to sell it as in a bond levy or bond/operating.
But I think Randy and I, and maybe even others, we've said, I would not personally vote to demolish Morrow until I knew that I had turned over every rock that we could turn over, and I think we're pretty close to where we're just about to the last rock, where we're gonna have to make a move to get people to get moving to save it, or you don't have a whole lot of other options available.
And John, to put this kind of thing together that you're talking about, I mean, I know you said 90 days, but I mean, realistically, in my mind, I would like to, do some kind of steps moving forward. And if we said, okay, we're going to auction it, say we're gonna auction it, I don't know, making numbers up, but 6 months. In 6 months, we're gonna do X, we're gonna put the thing in the paper, we're gonna do these things, and this is where we're gonna, would that be a catalyst, if you will? I'd throw 6 months out there, I don't know.
I'm thinking that's July.
It's July.
Will that be enough?
It's August,
I mean-
actually.
Well, July or August,
Right.
so
I mean,
maybe it's July,
yeah.
I don't know, okay, maybe it's 4 months, 5 months, I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out there. Would that be the catalyst that you say that you think that people would need? And then you would know whether or not they're gonna move one way or the other, and then at that point, we say at that point, we've exhausted every means. We've done everything we know to do.
It makes your stance official,
Sure.
right? You put a
Like
date
I
out
do.
there, just gonna auction this
I
building.
would just make
in
sure
July,
that, I would just make
and
sure
if
that
The
auction
CIC
isn't.
wants to form, they can form.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If
That's what I'm
somebody
saying,
wants to
Warren.
come in and buy it for whatever, they can do that.
Just be careful if we think the auction is going to cause some turmoil, be careful to not have it too close
Well, yeah, I just
to the
said 6
bond
months, that
levy.
was a number I
So
pulled
we
out,
need
yeah.
a buffer, and then
Maybe
my
it's-
only other thought was, if you push it too far out, people are gonna say, I got time, I don't need to think about this for another 2 months. The reality is nobody's gonna do anything, most likely, until they have to, until it's literally a few weeks away. So whether you set it, 6 weeks from now or 6 months from now, my guess is that,
But,
you know,
I would want, I would
You don't
want
want
you
it
to
to
have
be too
ample
short.
time to
Right,
contact
right.
whoever it is you're gonna
And I
contact.
think he said 90 days
And you,
is what he
so
thought.
90 days, so we put it out, say,
3 months.
3 months.
But Randy,
Well, yeah, but I'm saying.
So we
give
could
them
put the
time, 4
auction-
months.
4 months?
4 months.
so let me add though, that if you put it up for auction and nobody bids, then it opens the door for them guys, for anybody that we want, that you want,
Right.
to give it to transact it on your own terms, and the minimum auction amount doesn't apply, which helps accelerate it. So if you have a shorter window,
No, I agree with you on that. I'm just, he was saying he needed around 90 days or so to put something like that together.
but he doesn't have to have that ready the day the auction comes out empty. If the auction comes out empty, then your cards are all in your hand.
Yeah,
You
we
can
did
choose
the other
what-
way,
how to
that
play
somebody,
with it.
right.
Basically,
Right.
what you're doing is you're filling the square, that first hurdle.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can't, as a board, just divest yourself of the property unless you've gone through
Correct.
the auction
Well,
process.
that's what we're doing.
Right, cause
Do it.
they're not gonna be able to have thoughtful conversation until they know whether they're gonna get it for, whether they have to spend $1 or whether they have to spend $300,000. So if we can get the auction to be done, then you at least know
I think.
Right.
what you have to pay for.
I'm gonna have to start canvassing in the middle of August, so.
90 days.
90 days.
Or 3 months.
but did you hear what she just said? Christie just said?
What? I'm sorry.
I know, but I still wanna give John time.
In order for them to figure out what they need to do, the auction really needs to happen. Because that auction tells them whether or not they have to spend $1 or whether they have to spend $300,000.
Right.
So if it's $1,
We can go ahead and get our.
you're gonna be a lot more successful, hopefully.
In raising
Maybe.
funds. Well, no, it's not, raising
But-
funds is the lot.
More likely
You'll be
to
more
get
successful in
people.
taking ownership.
So what you're
Right.
saying is that we should have it pretty soon?
I would do the auction as quickly as you can so that you know.
Yeah.
All right.
So it-
And
So that
that
you
is
can
your
check
first
the
step in the
box.
hurdles.
So you
too.
don't need the 90 days?
Right, can
Well,
we set
the
the
90
auction?
days
and
is
then
immaterial.
whatever
Different
you
90
want?
days.
It might take 90 days to move to a lot.
It's on the books for-
Those things can be happen coincidentally. I mean, John, there's
It's-
people,
It's its valuation.
those people that are interested.
So
in
we don't have the
things
ability to
at
make
the
it
auction
higher than
buy it.
that to protect it.
No,
really
no.
don't.
You
I
can't do
think
that.
it was last valued at
That's what they were doing here.
120 something.
And you could,
What are
put
you
it up
smiling
higher,
at?
so nobody.
Just buy it.
What are you smiling
An
at?
offer you can't refuse.
Personally, I don't think we're gonna get it.
I don't know, I don't think
Distraction.
anybody's,
No.
I don't think.
I don't think you really need to worry. I mean, we don't.
But-
But,
need to-
then
I
let's
know.
at least get it done.
You're way off
Yeah.
track.
Get the process
Do what we have to
done.
do and then it's up to us.
Because
And
then
by
it's
putting
far
it-
enough away from the bond
And by
levy
putting
too.
it for auction, to have full disclosure on it, that's where I think where you're gonna have your issue, is what it's gonna, your estimate for the abating of the property itself. So, you know, and you have those figures.
Right, yeah, we know how much it would
You want a
cost.
copy of it, John? You want a copy of it?
That-
Full
at this
disclosure.
point,
People have close to zero interest at an auction
I think-
because of the issues with the property and the investment needed. You
You
wanna-
hear what he said?
From a guy that works in banking in the room and works primarily with real estate transactions, I think because of the issues with the property, you're gonna find out there's not a lot of viable options at any reasonable cost to go into that space in the short term. Most auctions, people showing up at a home that needs paint and carpet and drywall, to turn it into a rental property, it's a completely different scenario. Or a commercial space or something like that. This is, in banking, what we call really limited use or special use property, and it's gonna need a considerable investment. So the sooner that you find you get to that point, and then you can work with private entities, people with deep pockets, you reach out to all the Ys of the world, the Career Center, people for satellite campuses, and things like that. I just think it's highly unlikely in an auction, and that's the reason to have it sooner rather than later, that someone's gonna step up, pay a few $100,000 and have millions of dollars to put into it for what in downtown Warren?
I think the other reality is, the CIC option would pan out at the end of the day for all of those similar reasons. So I think as a board, you need to have in your mind, based on this accelerated timeline, what are you gonna do when there's
Yeah.
no
No
auction
bids.
and there's
Yeah.
no legitimate interest? So,
Right.
and think about the timing then as it relates to the November ballot, right? And you don't wanna get yourself into unanticipated consequence of now you gotta make a decision to raise it.
From a legal standpoint, I don't know if you know the answer to this, Greg. Say we have the auction and there is no interest. We do not have to make a decision at that point what we're gonna do with it then.
No, right.
So from that time on, whatever might happen, we could theoretically,
Whatever might happen.
yeah. So,
You could put,
So we can do more than
You
that.
you could accelerate and move
Okay.
forward
well,
with
it
a
takes how
sale
long?
to someone else that for a token amount, you could
Right.
you could decide that there's a legacy issue with trying to sell it to somebody else that the school district, not uncertainty of if you sell it, say, to a private owner, and it turns into an eyesore in the village, the district will always have a legacy tied to that property because it looks like a school, it was a school. And if there's an issue with a new owner in there not not looking welcoming, or it becomes a nuisance property in the community, the district would tend to have that legacy piece to that, well, look at what the district did to our community, or you could, turn it into a
So
vacant lot.
the
and then
steps to
donate
do
it.
the auction though, we have to put it in the paper for how many days? Is it 30 days?
2 weeks, I think.
Is it 2 weeks?
Yeah, I'll double check, I think it's on 2 weeks.
Let us do it.
Well, we can't have a vote at this, this is.
I'm
No,
not
no,
sure.
no.
Well, you don't
We're just
realize,
thinking
We
out loud.
gotta do this.
I was thinking out loud.
Okay.
I don't think you really need
that's a lot of.
to have a formal vote.
First item
Once
next.
you have a formal vote, you can put that as an agenda item
Let's
for
do
next
that.
Tuesday night.
Let's do that.
I'll go through the
That gives
auction
everybody
process.
documentation.
So if it doesn't sell at the auction, which doesn't sound like Mark is thinking we have a
It
shot,
just doesn't look
which is
positive.
beneficial for Mr. Poe, that'll give him longer to do what he's trying to do. If that doesn't go through, we can say to the Historical Society, for $5, take this off. Do it, whatever. I mean, we have that opportunity to do that.
Historical
I'll loan
Society.
you five.
You know,
Well, I think that that's something the board would have to vet. If you got an offer from somebody, I think, it would be incumbent upon us to try to figure out and have a conversation with a potential buyer as to what their plans are.
Right, no, I agree. I
One, that
agree.
they're not gonna put anything in there that, maybe goes against the village zoning code, that,
Well, you and I talked about this before, a charter school or whatever. You would,
Well, by law,
after the auction, we could say, no, we don't wanna sell.
now by law, if we do have a vacant building, we do have to, as a school building, we do have to offer it to any charters that are within the boundaries of our district, so when you,
His funding's getting cut 25%.
Oh, give it to
this
Mr.
coming year.
Isaacs.
It's getting cut 25%. We don't have to worry about that.
now, as you think about Mainville and as you think about Butlerville, I don't think we have any charters within our borders yet, but within the next couple of years, there could be charters within our borders. In which case, I think you have to offer it for a minimum sale price to the charter and divest yourself of the property within 2 years after it goes empty. So as far as looking, unless you're gonna demo, say, the Mainville site and put a transportation piece there and you don't have a use for it, we would be obligated to make that offer first, before we then
Then,
try to
Greg,
auction
can we do this
ourselves.
then? Let's put Mara Elementary on the agenda for the February meeting.
Okay,
And we'll be prepared to move officially. And then we will start the wheels turning.
another thing I'd like to talk to the board just for a minute is just informational. We've been researching where the board goes next, where the board people go. I think it's looking like we're gonna work out of the trunks of our car next year.
Oh, you're looking
I'll
mobile.
have to get a bigger car.
Well, the
looking at some unfinished square footage in the district, and, we've done some preliminary negotiating on a lease rate for some square footage, and sharing some more detail with you about that. It's unfinished space that we would have to finish. It is in the area, and I just wanted to let you know that we're bringing some projected cost figures and maybe a draft of a potential lease that we might talk about in the executive session, since it's a contract circumstance, at next week's meeting.
And that'll be at next week's, okay. All right. Is there any additional things here we need to?
Where do we go from
That's what I was gonna say, we need.
here on
Is
the
it-
options?
We're gonna,
I need direction.
we're gonna have to look at this and begin to hammer this out and what we believe. We lost Mike, he went to the restroom, or can he be back? Okay. I didn't know if you left or.
No, I'm in my, it's last,
You obviously can't make a decision today, really, right?
Right,
On this?
no, we can't.
But you can make
We can
a
talk.
decision on what you're gonna vote on, right?
And,
You can let us know what you want more detail cost-wise on
Okay.
an option. You don't have to take a formal vote on it tonight, but you could do that at next Tuesday night board meeting.
so we know, yeah. All of us should
You
give
can-
this.
You can just tell us generally what you want us to do further research on, which
I
option.
mean, we're really getting to the point where we need to make a decision on an option, so that we can do the final push on due diligence to make sure that we have the costs, in a line for the bond levy. So that we are ready for that June date.
Well, once we
There's-
have that down though, then I'd like John and the BAC to look that over and come back with us with some scenarios. And if two of us from the board would be willing to work with the BAC on that from an operating millage standpoint, and then we would be able to combine those two, or maybe not all of it, maybe all of it, I don't know. And that way we could put it together and then have one package that we could move forward with, okay? So the thing we have to do now, well, that's what I was gonna say, what we
Well,
have to do now is determine what we
When you
like.
guys are ready, it's fine, but just know that
We just had some discussion.
we still have quite a bit of work that we need to do.
There's a
to
lot of
make sure
discussion that we have to have as a board.
So can the BAC, call a special meeting?
We have subcommittees.
Yeah, we do subcommittees, I can, yeah.
Okay.
We first have to determine which plan or which hybrid that we want, and we don't necessarily have to pick it tonight, but we do have to
Well,
begin.
like we talked on our BAC, there's kind of like a few phases we're gonna get to between now and November. You have to figure out an option and a cost and
Right.
get behind that.
We have-
And then I think you should focus on that in the ultra short term, and then we should be talking about, you know, how much operating and in what form, kind of in that next phase, but those things have to happen by whatever the deadline is to get on the ballot.
Yeah, I think the operating piece can be in tandem.
Right, no, I agree with that.
But we're
We
gonna
first have
a
to
large
select which
sales effort, so I think
which
the sooner
plan
we
that
And
get
money
that
wise,
going,
what it's gonna cost,
Yeah.
the approximate
The better.
costs right now.
Yes, I know.
Including transportation.
I've done this
Yes.
once.
Rusty
Christie,
will
the
be
plan
filled up
for
and he'll be ready
two
to go
C
door
that
to
we've
door.
been discussing,
Yeah.
doesn't really do anything right now on the
I'm not
44 acres that we
door to
have.
It does not.
No.
It
We
does
all
not.
have at one point in time.
Well,
Which
I'm,
can be
That-
used
that
for
So,
plan-
I mean, we could, I mean, if we're really close to picking 2C, one, we gotta be thinking about property. And
Right.
that 44 acre piece could also be sold to help offset.
would we be able to run to executive session and make a decision, or it's not a contract
To make a decision on an option,
on an option?
yeah, that would have to take, that would take,
Okay,
that would be a
asking-
public
Right,
session dialogue.
okay, so,
Can we talk about it?
yeah, we can talk
We can
about
talk
it,
about it.
but,
Just can't decide.
you just cannot decide right now,
There's one
so,
question I have about that 44 acre site.
go ahead.
We're looking for space for
Yeah, I mean, I
transportation,
could-
we're looking
I
for
think,
space
like
for
I said,
central
I think I
office.
hear-
Is that not a viable option?
no,
for that?
totally.
No, it's still a
Absolutely.
viable option, but you have to not.
But
you have to
be
build
built
buildings.
all, okay, okay.
I mean, you're gonna be building a transportation facility no matter what. So whether you build it on the 44 acre, whether you build it on the Mainville site, I mean, you need to build it somewhere.
Well, let me ask this question.
Mainville
on
is
the-
large enough for that.
What?
Mainville is big enough currently to build, to house
It-
transportation.
We need 10 acres, Mainville is 10 acres. What we would need to do is we probably would need to do a traffic study or something to make sure that that kind of traffic coming in and out of that site is supported by those roads.
I'm gonna guess there
Um,
could be.
Has that study been done on the Zor Road site?
Right, and so that's
There's
one
been
of
no
my,
studies done in that.
Because I think you may also have a problem putting the transportation on the 44 acres going across Ford Road
right, because.
to
of
get to the
utilities.
east side of the district, or you're gonna flood everything down on 22 and 3 through Zor. So I think the logistics of this transportation site
Correct.
is complicated.
But our last
And
conversation
costly.
that we talked about before with the 1,000 student building at Salem,
Mhm.
and then tearing it down in front, the transportation stays where it is. There's enough room there
There
that it stays
is.
where it is.
There is. Now, the
So-
question
Could be
is,
phase two, too.
is if we are going to be building a new transportation facility, you need a new bus maintenance garage, you need a new building for that facility. Then the question is, do you keep it where it is? If you do, you are limiting the flexibility of that Salem site in terms of future growth, because you are taking up a sizable chunk of that property. So if that 1,000-student elementary wants to become a 1,500-student elementary at some point, you might be kicking yourself for keeping the transportation
Wait,
on
wait,
that site.
wait a second, but if I've got a Salem building sitting there now, and I built 1,000 students building behind it,
Uh-huh.
I now theoretically have two buildings on here, and I still have the transportation
You
department.
need to take Salem down to be able to
Yeah,
get your
well,
parking and play and
I
stuff like
understand,
that,
but
right.
once I take that building down,
Uh-huh.
I should still have enough room back there for my transportation.
Not if you grow, is what she's saying.
If you
But
wanna-
even if I grow, I've got an entire football field there.
The transportation facility is taking that football field. If we rebuild that
Not right now, it's
transportation.
not.
But it will.
It
But
will,
it will, okay,
right.
I
So
agree.
you
But if we
can't
take
count on
that football
anything.
field, then it's bigger than it is now.
But you also need playground space and,
I understand, we were looking at those in the
Yeah.
last
Right,
meeting,
right.
and there, all that was already in there.
Right.
So that's why I'm
I'm
a little
just worried that
confused
if
on
at
why
some
I have
point
to
you
find
say,
another
hey-
10-acre site.
I'm just worried that if at some point you say, I wanna make this 1,000-student elementary a 1,500-student elementary, and you can't go at all to the one direction because the transportation facility is taking up that whole area. The only thing you can do is push forward towards the road,
Right,
which is where your parking is going to be for that at some point you might be running out of
Or
room.
we
I just
build
don't
it.
want you to have an issue like the high school
Or
is
we
right now.
build it with the option to build another story on there.
well, the issue is gonna be physical space, because as our enrollment increases, our bus fleet is going to increase if we can ever figure
Yeah.
out.
Right,
how
but
to
if
run
we
buses.
still have
Right.
that same amount
but
of
what Nancy's saying is go up instead of
transportation,
out.
build Salem, that if we go to 1,500, it's going up, not out.
Every time I've heard that though, it's never happened, ever,
It's
ever.
hard,
But it should.
it's hard to go up, because the only thing that can go up is classrooms.
Sure.
Anything else in your school program isn't going up, because it's cafeteria,
But for
it's
an
gym, it's
elementary,
media center.
if that was all, mostly what the bottom floor was taken care of, you'd still have space to put classrooms.
Mark
Well, and I was just gonna say that-
and Rusty had a comment.
ahead.
Good, I didn't know who was first. I
No,
didn't-
my comment's real simple. If the transportation issue is fixed where it is right now and it's working, then you do not need a transportation study. You do not need to
Correct.
Right,
look
That's true.
at what's going on in the village of Mainville, whether or not you would need to put a stoplight in where there's a four-way,
Right.
and all those other sorts of things. And at some point in time, if you then ran out of space in Salem, you simply look to relocate the
Exactly.
transportation.
that was me.
But here's the issue,
What-
we're
what-
we're talking about building new maintenance garages and a new facility, and then so we're gonna build that, and then 10 years from now, we're gonna move it.
Right, because you showed that was like $15 million, 12 to 15.
No, it's like
I would-
it was
Five and a
like a
half.
$5 to $6
Five and a
million
half.
endeavor. The only thing with the traffic issue that I would wanna make sure that we had covered is that you're gonna continue to add buses and buses and buses. And so that's not a big road back there, and it's pretty curvy. So I would wanna make sure that as we continue to add to your fleet, that location is okay.
Yeah,
Is there anything on
And I don't
48,
know.
22 and 3 for that? Any of the commercial property open that's like the Charles A. Hamilton thing up on 48, or is that too expensive, or the Rolls Royce facility?
Yeah, we're not doing that.
Look at that.
I was simply gonna say that if you need a new transportation facility, the scope of the facility probably won't be dramatically different whether it's at Mainville or Salem. And our big hurdle in the room is operational efficiency and
Yes.
cost. And I would have to think it's nominal savings, but it's cheaper to run your buses closer to where they're, to the more densely
Oh,
populous
for
part of
sure.
your district at Mainville than at Salem, and you probably shorten time on buses, which is something that we heard from the community as well.
I don't think
And you repurpose one of
Mainville-
your sites that you're shutting down.
I don't think Mainville is where it's essentially located. I think, from what I heard from transportation, where we are now is pretty much central to our district.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is that most of the people would live in that.
Or
the buses
But the
would be-
buses have to go regardless.
Right, but they're just saying they'd be on buses,
Right.
a shorter,
But you have a shorter
bus
trip
trip,
to a
shorter
lot of
trip.
your district in
In other words,
Mainville
instead of
versus
driving from
outside.
Morrow to Mayville to Plainville.
Because of all the subdivisions that will
Yeah,
probably
that-
get
it might gain some
2
route
miles.
efficiency.
It's nominal savings, but it's
But
a
it's still gonna be
savings.
something.
You're close to both of your people.
If it works from a traffic standpoint.
What, is there anything
I
that
mean,
you guys
it
need
might not
additional
hurt to just
information?
evaluate Mainville's
This
site,
No,
just
I just wanted to talk about.
to see.
Well,
I mean, my
we need to
preference
do
would
a
be just to
follow-up.
make sure that you have the most flexibility on the same old site. My preference would be that it was on a different site.
I mean, you're
I wouldn't
repurposing
want a
and
bus
going.
facility sitting right in front of it.
I worry about all that bus traffic right next to.
Your point, if we could build it, keep it there for 30 years, 5 years, 7 years, let's do it. But I feel like we've heard the footprint of the new school has to take part.
We can't, we're not allowed to
I
go
feel
into
like that, I
executive
should
session.
just say.
So we looked at three last time.
That would be my choice.
We looked at three options.
Right.
We'll talk about ours about where we take it. This is a
So we want to dismiss everyone?
When it doesn't sell an auction, we'll plow it
Okay.
and turn it into a park.
All right,
I'll help
this,
if this makes sense.
Greg, can I borrow you for a
No
second?
one's gonna buy it.
Here's what we would,
Beat the level of investment that's needed.
here's what we would like to do.
We're not on the board, it's easy for us.
No, no, we don't. I guess you weren't at the phone. So, we want to keep it smaller.
Okay, I just want to make sure, I didn't want to break it. At this time, anybody that wants to go can go. We're gonna, the 5 of us are gonna sit here and kind of huddle up and go through some of these. If we've got any additional things, Christie, we will let Greg know. And he can, that way, because I know a lot of people are getting tired, and a lot of, so we just need to kind of, the 5 of us kind of need to go through these things and kind of hash them out.
I'll leave all my, I'll leave all.
Yes.
No, I'll leave my.
I think
the
Greg is-
lowball offer on the
Greg is
land
there.
across the
Yeah, I need to-
should be one direction.
Let's take a quick break and then we'll
Yes,
come
let's
back.
do.
Across the street.
Terry,
Well, across the street from here, that's 90
Tell you
acres.
when we do that.